There's certainly not going to be enough money. You can get the money from two places. You can tax it or you can print it. So
Ray Dalio is one of the greatest economic geniuses of all time. He is the founder of Bridgewater, one of the world's most prestigious hedge funds. He provides unique insight into the inner workings of the economy and the stock market. He recently caught my attention when he started talking about what he calls massive wealth transfers. Today, I'm going to share with you a recent speech he gave, and we'll discuss whether he's right or wrong. I ask you to watch the video to the end and share your views with us.
if we look at the central government, you can see how the combination of the higher debt service payments together with the needs for greater defense spending, greater climate spending, and then you take the entitlements and other things, you're seeing a debt service crowding out of consumption happening in the budget deficits. And then you're also seeing supply demand issues of selling those bonds to the rest of the world because no longer are they as attractive, and as a percentage of their of foreigners' portfolios, they're an issue. So we certainly have something that you cannot extrapolate. I think let's talk about the bond market for a moment and easing that's built into it. So I think that there's a mistaken popular view that there should be an easing. So if you look at the or a magnitude of easing, that is the largest since I think it's like 1981 or two. There's a lot of discounting. I mean, I think it's nearly 200 basis points in the next 2 years, kind of discounting. Now, so let's step back and say, what should the rates look at what the equilibrium levels are, which I mean appropriate, that there is a real interest rate that's high enough for the creditor without being too high for the debtor, which, by the way, becomes a difficult balancing act the more debt you create. And you look at the inflation rate. You can pick the number of what people think the inflation rate is. A lot of those numbers would be in the vicinity of 2.5 would be, I would say, below 3%, but whatever it is, 2.5 and 3%. And then you take the long rate, it's about 200 basis points. So that brings you up in the vicinity of the bond yield in the vicinity of a 5%, 4.5 and 5% level, given a normal equilibrium. I think there's a strong tendency to believe that the yield curve should be positive. I think that if they eventually it'll settle out to be positive. But if you're looking at then the existing level of inflation, it certainly is not at target, and they will ease up on that target. They will probably accept an inflation rate at 2.5 to 3%. And the form of the economy, the form of the markets, form of credit spreads, and so on, definitely too easy. What's wrong with the existing monetary policy, the existing term structure of interest rates in terms of growth and inflation? Is growth and inflation such that growth is too low and inflation is too low, and that you should have a stimulative monetary policy? That is under the normal set of circumstances. If we now say, then, what are the risks to those scenarios? I would say the risks are of significantly higher issues of inflation and so on for issues pertaining to the political issues. And we'll probably get into that. But how tariffs will rise, how other things will take place, and what's going on geopolitically creates another risk. And then there's the supply demand. So when I look at the bond market, I think the bond market is at around these levels, appropriately priced in that vicinity of 4.5. I think probably longer term, it's not going to, that's too low. And then if I take the slope of the yield curve and where the short rates are and where the existing rates of inflation are and so on, there's a 200 basis point easing. And we still have the big budget deficit and current account deficit issues going on.
Let's explore inflation a bit more, focusing on the fiscal policy side, Ray. You've made the point that politically, neither of the presidential candidates has an incentive to rein in spending. The Biden administration doesn't want to see too much of a constraint going into the election, and it really doesn't appear that Trump and his people really want to spend less either. So I think the picture you're painting here is a hotter inflationary environment than's currently priced into interest rate markets. Can you walk us through how you're thinking about that?
Well, there's two issues. There's first the inflation rate, and second, there is the supply demand for the bonds. If I'm looking at the inflation rate, and I look at the core levels, particularly income levels and spending levels, and I come up with about 3%. It's 2.5%. I don't really know the difference. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to say we are not at the 2% targeted. So we're above that. And current, one would say, is in that vicinity. That's not much of a disputable question. And then you could add on rates before. As we go forward in terms of the supply demand issue, we know that we're going to have a lot more. I'm talking about money, supply of money. There is not going to be any remediation. In fact, there is going to have to be increase in spending. And if you take where the geopolitical situation is, not only internally, but I said geopolitical, and you look at what, for example, the defense budget is, okay, it's a 1% increase in the budget, which is a negative real decrease. That is a pressing issue that people on both sides recognize. And they don't want to talk about it right now in terms of that issue. But that's not going to be a sustainable amount that we're in the world. Mm-hmm. And then if you then take into consideration the climate issue one way or another, that's estimated to be about $8 trillion a year, which is required. We're not going to spend that. We're spending about 1/6 of that, which means also one of the reasons we're not anywhere near approaching holding temperature increases at 1.5 degrees but anyway, it's that's 8% of world GDP. There's a lot of spending. And then there's the north-south issue. And then we're looking at the world and you say, who's going to afford these various things? You look at Europe and okay, we say Europe should take care of its defense. The need or more the demands for higher amounts of spending that are even put into that budget and those budgets. So the risks of those are on the upside. And if you just take what is projected and then you apply the debt service payments to that, the maturity of the debt and the amount of interest payments that has to be on that debt, that is creating a classic squeeze. In other words, I've seen this repeatedly happen throughout countries. And this is not sound, strong finances in right. which there's a good income statement and a balance sheet. So the value of debt assets is a function of these types of things. And so as we come into a world also of greater conflict, it has to be recognized that a debt asset is a risky asset to hold, because conflicts themselves create greater needs. And then there's also a settlement problem in terms of what is the asset that is exchangeable around the world. If you study markets during wars, and I've studied markets during wars, allies don't accept each other's money. Right. Because of the fact that that money, that debt that they'll take on, they know that country's going to get into more debt and probably have to monetize the debt, and they don't even know what will happen at the end of that. So the risks, literally, of holding money, debt assets during wars, or different types of assets during wars are high and lurk in the back. The issues pertaining to the possibility of unacceptable disruptions in supply lines.
Sort of demand-supply mismatch for U.S. paper, or for that matter, many governments around the world. So this is a threat to fiat currency. This is basically what you're raising. You've been talking about this for a while. We do see gold, for example, making new nominal highs. We do see Bitcoin making highs. I mean, part of that is structural in terms of the development of an ETF, but still, the demand is there. You would say that those market dynamics that we're seeing right now are not surprising.
That the most important thing that everybody should start with is a balanced portfolio. Up until now, we've been talking about what might happen. Okay. But if you put aside the uncertainties of the supply, demand, and such things, and you think about what is a balanced portfolio, what are my risks so that I have symmetrical risks so that I can go through any environment, one would have greater amounts of those assets, inflation hedge assets, that are the type of money. Okay, so let me just pause on that for, let's say, gold. Money that I can go from one place to another with, and it's accepted around the world. It's accepted by central banks. Today, by the way, gold is the third largest reserve after dollars and euro. And so it's a money that's accepted. And as the saying goes, it's an asset that is not somebody else's liability. Mm-hmm. Other ones, you're depending on getting paid. This one, you're not depending on possession, is the law, essentially. And it has a negative correlation, significant negative correlation with the top of the typical portfolios, which have a lot of equity beta in them, but equity or bond beta, it has, if you take any of the major crises, you see that movement out of money in that sort of way caused a spike in gold. And that if you take a portfolio optimizer and you were to say, what if I was to overlay gold in my portfolio, add it, it would reduce the risk and increase the expected return if you add that into a portfolio. So the issue is, at this time, why wouldn't you move to a more balanced portfolio? Why wouldn't you do those exercises in order to consider that?
There are a few points to consider when analyzing Ray Dalio's speech. First, the issues Dalio highlighted, such as debt and budget deficits, are really important. This could be a threat that could affect our future economic stability. But, like any problem, it is solvable, and there are various solutions. As much as he emphasizes it, he is doing nothing more than causing people a lot of fear and anxiety. While it is natural to worry about debt, it is important to focus on constructive solutions rather than panicking about it. For example, steps could be taken, such as more robust budget management and more effective tax policies. There are also measures that can be taken to stimulate the economy. As for interest rates, Dalio's characterization of current policies as completely flawed may be a bit extreme. While certain policy choices can be criticized, economic policy in general is a complex issue, and there is no single right answer. It is therefore important to take a more balanced view. As much as Dalio argues for a single truth, I think it is important to remember that economics is a science and every topic needs to be supported by a lot of arguments. As for alternative investment vehicles, Dalio's recommendation of assets such as gold and Bitcoin may make sense in terms of a diversification strategy. However, these assets also come with risks and uncertainties and should be managed carefully. However, while not an investment recommendation, my own preference is for precious metals such as gold. In conclusion, Dalio's speech raises important issues, but he may have used an overly negative tone at some points. I think it would be more useful to assess the economic situation in a more balanced way and focus on constructive solutions. I would like you to let me know in the comments whether Ray Dalio is right or wrong.